Hey guys, welcome to another video. Yeah, today I want to talk about something very interesting for boxers, something for boxing fans in particular, because it's something that's not really talked about so often. And I guess one of the reasons, if not the reason, is that it's not such a nice topic to talk about because it's about death. And nevertheless, I think we have to talk about it in a very objective way. And I will also give you one or two anecdotes of my personal experiences in my life here in Germany. So, yeah, at the end of the video, which will be a long one, by the way, I will give you my take on what medical studies, so official science found out about the mortality rate in pro boxing. Okay? That's basically what I want to talk about. And it will be a very long video, I guess. I try to cut it short as much as possible, but I think it will be a longer one. So feel free to pause whenever you want to, and if you cannot really watch it in one session, that's also okay. Well, then watch it whenever you want to, okay? So that's for the intro. And you will already see by the title that I have a certain opinion on that. But before we get to my personal opinion, let's simply start with, well, the content of the video, okay? So what I found out was when I was looking for death numbers in pro boxing, that CNN said, okay, each year there are about 13 boxers who die in the ring on average, okay? So that's a headline. That's not scientific conclusion or anything. It's simply a headline, okay? And what they then say here later on in this, or at the very beginning of the article, is that there's sort of a collection of data from a well, I would call him a hobby boxing historian named Manuel Velasquez. And he said that according to the statement by CNN, that between 1890 and 2011, there were 1,604 cases of boxers actually dying in the ring or related to injuries that they suffered in the ring. Okay, so first I said, okay, let me just take a look at this Manuel Velasquez, okay, because they linked it here, and I'm going to open it up for you. So first, when you see this PDF data or this PDF file, so to speak, don't be fooled. It's not always science simply because it's put online and it's put in a PDF format, okay? A portable data format, I think it's called. PDF is the abbreviation, okay? So we have some data here, and although it isn't officially a scientific paper we're looking at here right now, that doesn't mean that the data is false. The data can be 100% correct. And we have a semi-scientific approach here with very interesting data, and I can already say right now that the data is 100% correct, okay? Simply because there's a paper that took all the data from Manuel Velasquez and transformed the data into scientific proven numbers, okay? So that's basically here just the introduction. You see something where he talks about why boxing is so attractive for so many people, and he gives you all those sources here, which is already a great sign, okay? So if you see something like that somebody does not only state something but actually delivers the sources so that you can check the data yourself, that's always a good thing. And it's quite a long PDF file here, and not everything is so important for us because we're talking about mortality rates, right? And the most important graph you find here is the graph you can see on page 4 of this document. The table 2, deaths per decade from 1720 to 2011. So almost 300 years of data, okay? And what we can see here obviously is that the amount of deaths increased since the 1880s, 1890s, and that is due to the fact that boxing wasn't really popular before that. So before the 1880s came around, boxing was still something that was only performed by very, very few people. And you also have to keep in mind that there were not really specific rules for boxing. I think in the 18th century it became a bit more regulated in the 19th century, and as soon as it started to become a popular sport, we see the death numbers rise up. But that's not because it became more brutal than it already is. It's rather the opposite, because since the 1890s there were a lot of regulations and a lot of rules implied, so to make the sport very fair as it can be, and also as safe as it can be. The only reason why we see here an increase in numbers is simply because more people picked up the sport. Okay, that's it. And he also then says that his data was basically used in this in this paper published by the Neurosurgery Journal of Neurosurgery in 2010. And here's, for example, a link where you can try to get it. Okay, but we all step aside and let this sample or this collection be as it is, because I actually have the paper here in front of me, and that's a case report. Okay, it's not a case study, but it's a case report. And what we have here is we have the mortality resulting from head injury in professional boxing case report. Okay, most of you guys know that boxing is a very dangerous sport because you get really punched in your face all the time, right? When you try to clinch, the referee breaks you up and resets you, and then you have to go for it again and again. Okay, so because of the volume of punches and also the specification on fighting with your fists only, boxing is a very, very dangerous sport, and it's of course the sport where people strike the hardest. Right, it's the sport where people strike the hardest, because everything boxers do is simply strike. So of course, over the course of, let's say, 10 to 15 years of training, you develop not only speed but also enormous punching power. Okay, so we have here the mortality resulting from head injury in professional boxing case report. By the way, why can you see that this is really a scientific paper? Well, first of all, you have all the people who were working on this paper. You have an abstract that typically, introduces you to what the paper is about. You have some keywords here. You have the volume of the printed version. It's the Journal for Neurosurgery, volume 67, and its episode, I think, 519 to 520, and this was officially released in 2010. And here you can also, for example, purchase this article, or if you directly want to go to the actual paper, you can also use the direct link. Okay, so that's for the introduction. You can definitely see these are all things that hint for a serious and a real scientific paper. And this paper had me, well, go through it for, I would say, up to 8 hours, because it is an official scientific paper, and it has very interesting information for all of us, for all of us who are interested in boxing, but it's sort of unsorted in some ways. It's contradicting itself sometimes, and it's not always to overlook what they really want to tell you. Okay, so I'm going to go through it step by step. And I'm going to mark everything I'm talking to you about also here, yeah, on the screen. So first of all, we used the Velasquez Fatality Collection of Boxing Injuries and Supplementary Sources to analyze mortality from 1950 to 2007. So they did not use the whole collection, just the data from 1950 to 2007. And the reason being is, I think they thought like the old data is interesting, but I think it's not really so much reliable. And that's why I guess they chose the more modern data to get this problem out of the way. Okay, so that's the first thing. So we're talking about a span of 57 years, right? And then they say, okay, there are 339 people who actually died because of boxing. Okay. That's the first thing I wanted to tell you. And before I come to other specifics, they also said, okay, we split the whole distribution in basically two. So we first took a look at the whole distribution and calculated statistics then. And then we said, okay, let's see if anything changes in terms of the statistics when we simply go from 1983 to 2007, okay? And why did they choose 1983 as sort of a, well, benchmark? Well, that's because the WBC reduced the rounds for championship bouts from 15 to 12 rounds because they saw that most of the damage being done to boxers, and especially the severe damage that can lead to death, is most of the time done in the last 3 rounds of a 15-round fight. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to tell you. So these are basically the things we have to keep in mind. But I want to say something concerning this 1983 number, or the year 1983. I mean, the WBC really did it in 1983, so the reduction from 15 rounds to 12. But not every sanctioning body did it. And I have a perfect example from or of the IBF, where they held a super middleweight world title fight from between Graziano Rocchigiani and Nicky Walker in 1989. So the WBC, the green strap, or the organization behind the green strap, did it officially in 1983, but the IBF did it in 1989 after this last 15-round world title bout. Okay, so that's what you have to keep in mind. So you always have to the numbers after 1983, especially if you take them isolated, or if you look at them in a isolated way, have to be taken with a grain of salt. Okay, that's one thing. And then they mention, I think it's, where is it actually? It's on the second page, I think, where they also talk about that there were other security measures done, like, for example, going from 3 ropes up to 4 ropes. I think that's, I cannot find it here right now. Let me just see if I find it somewhere in the article. It's quite an extensive article, although there are also a lot of graphs, as you will see later on. I can't find this particular thing right now, but what I can say is that because of the deaths that took place, boxing was always seen from the medical community, or by the medical community, as a sport that should be forbidden. Okay, so physicians never really liked boxing. So from a medical perspective, okay, although we know there are health benefits when you're doing like boxing fitness workouts, which are undoubtedly there. They didn't really like the sport itself. So the real sport where you have full contact and where you might really, well, hurt and kill somebody. And this Korean lightweight, Dak-Koo Kim, was the reason why the WBC chose to go down in rounds, because he was knocked out and he was killed in the 14th round. So people were shocked by that, although there were much harder and much more brutal knockouts in the history of boxing, way before the 70s and 80s. Okay, so we also have to keep that in mind, but that's how it is. Okay, sometimes people need some time to realize that we're dealing here with a very, very not only difficult but also very dangerous sport. So obviously they say, okay, it's the punches against the jaw, the forehead, and the head in general that's a problem. And they say here in this article that boxers die either from traumas and or by the damage done to the blood vessels in the head, because I mean obviously you can also die from a brain bleeding, for example, right? And that's what they say here in this paragraph. Okay, that's one thing. So then they also say, okay, it's also dangerous because if you get knocked down, if not out, and your skull basically hits the canvas, there's another exposure to real injuries for your head. Okay, that's basically everything in terms of the foreplay, so to speak. And now they go for the actual criteria, which is more important. So they took the Velasquez database, as I already said. They mentioned it here once again, and they said they are only looking on pro boxing events, but they also mention amateur boxers who died. So you can see they are somehow irritating the reader, which I don't really like about it. I like all the results and the numbers they show, but they really irritate the reader because they come up with stuff you're not really interested in, because it's called pro boxing. Okay, it's called the mortality rate in pro boxing. So why do they come up with something like amateur mortalities? Okay, that's one thing. Here they put up this very interesting graph, but also a garbage one, because as I said, it's about professional boxing fatalities, not all boxing fatalities. So again, they are irritating us with this graph here. And now we come to something that is actually interesting, okay? So they say the mean age of the boxer at time of death is 24, with a standard deviation of almost 4 years. Means the real mean, the real average is 24 years, which is quite young. And I will come at the end of the video to why I think it's the young guys who die and not the old guys, so to speak. The real average is 24, but we have a huge accumulation in a range between 20 to 28. So that's what the standard deviation of 3.8 years wants to show us. The whole range, the full range, is 17 to 34 years. So the youngest one to die was 17 and the oldest one to die was 35. And then they come up with the mode. Most people who haven't had any statistics in their studies, for example, don't know what the mode is. The mode is simply the most frequent value in a distribution. Means it's not the average, but it's the age that was the most frequent among all the people who died in this case report. Okay, so we know the average is 24 because you have older guys than 22, But 22 was really the year that was the year where we can say, okay, most people really died when they were 22. Among all those who died in this 57-year time span, okay? So that's what the mode is. And again, very, very young. Why is that? Shouldn't be a younger guy fitter? I will come to that later on. Then they come up again with some funny information, but it's basically garbage because it has nothing to do with our study here, because it's anecdotes from the 1800s, yes, from the 1800s, and so therefore we shouldn't really care about, because it's not in the survey anyway. So, if you take the whole distribution, or the complete series as they call it, here we have the numbers of the deaths concerning the fight outcome. Okay, that's the first thing. So, 64% of the people who died because of a knockout. They don't really say whether it's a one-punch knockout or a combination knockout. Okay, then they say 15% died because of a TKO. Okay, again, they don't say why the referee decided to stop the fight. Was it because the guy was knocked down before, or was it simply because he had seen enough? Okay. Also, interesting, 5% died even though winning the fight by decision, and 9% died after losing a fight by decision. 1% followed. 1% died after a no decision. A no decision is rare anyways. So when you have people who die after a no decision, you always have in mind, well, were drugs at play? Was somebody cheating with the gloves? Why was this fight called a no decision? So it's obviously only called a no decision when either drugs are at play, or when there was some cheating going on. Okay, and then they mention 2% died because, or after draws. Okay, after draws. And then they split everything up and say, okay, let's see how everything changes when we go up to 1983 and move from there on. So the starting point becomes 1983 and not 1950. I will tell you my thoughts on that in a minute when I show you the graphs, because these data is also visualized. Okay, so we have to keep in mind another thing. The criteria they use is the age at death to give an overlook. That's what we already had. Then how the fight played out. So KO, TKO, win, loss, draw, no contest, no decision, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And then also how many rounds were fought, and in which weight class the boxers actually performed, and then finally the location where the injury occurred that led to coma, and then later on to death. Okay, so yeah, we had the age, we had the fight outcome, and now we have the rounds. Okay, now we have the rounds, and again they made an average round and said, okay, the mean round where a KO happened was round 7 with a standard deviation of 3 rounds. So some people also died, or a lot of people also died between the round number 4 and the round number 10. But again, the average is number 7. Okay, that's it concerning the rounds. Now we come to the most important thing, I think personally, and it's the weight class. The weight class, okay? And for you guys who ask themselves, okay, what weight classes did they officially take a look at? And that's the old, if you ask which weight classes they looked at, then I can say that it's only the weight classes that were officially allowed and started in 1910. Because before 1910, everybody was basically a heavyweight. So if you were a heavyweight or not, you were supposed to fight against people who were heavyweights, right? So to make it safer, to make boxing safer, they introduced those weight classes, and we can see that. Well, maybe you cannot really see it that much here, although you should, but you can definitely see it on the page, on the following pages, that it's especially the lighter guys who die, and not so much the heavier guys, okay? And again, an inconsistency, the cruiserweight division wasn't launched before 1979, so I don't know why they put the cruiserweight in there, but not all the other weight classes they were in between. And the only reason I can really think of it, why they did it, or why they didn't do it, so to speak, is because the super middleweight was officially recognized as a weight class in 1988, the super welterweight in 1962, the super lightweight in 1959, the super featherweight in 1959 as well, the super bantamweight in 1976, and the super flyweight in 1975, and the minimum weight or straw weight in 1987. So I think simply because they didn't have enough data and they wanted to avoid inconsistencies, which they should have also done in writing down this paper, by the way, they removed all the others, okay? But I think they should have removed the cruiserweight division as well, because it wasn't a division until 1979, okay? Yeah, and then they say, okay, let's see how the mortality compares from country to country, which is so uninteresting to me personally. But then we come to a thing that's actually very interesting, and that's when actually the injury that leads to coma and then to death happened. And here they say it's 61%, so 61% of the mortalities or the pre-terminal event in the ring, which is the injury that leads to death in the progress, occurred in the ring. Okay, 17% after the fight in the locker room, 10% 24 hours after the fight when fighters are at home, and 12% even after 24 hours after the fight. So you cannot really be sure until you are sure, right? That's something you have to keep in mind when you take a look at these numbers. Here again, everything I said. So once the complete distribution, then after 1983, some numbers did slightly change, but not too much. Okay, so I wouldn't really take too much note from this box here. And I have a problem with this visualization because, as I already told you, okay, from 1950 to 2007, we have the numbers, we have the percentages, we have everything we need, okay? But then there are, of course, as I said, some problems. Especially here when you take a look at the TKO, okay? What kind of stoppage was it, okay? What kind of stoppage was it? And when you compare then the distribution from 1983 to 2007, they suddenly make a difference between a TKO loss and a TKO win. And why do they do that? Why didn't they do it in the first place? Why do they start doing it only for the shorter distribution? And also another thing you have to keep in mind when we're talking about KOs. I mean, there could be people who knocked somebody out in the fight but still died afterwards because they suffered a lot of punishment themselves. Why don't they include it here when they include a decision win and a decision loss, right? So another point you just have to make when you take a look at everything. Okay, that's basically it. And now we come to the table, and now I really want to talk about the weight classes. So we can definitely see, if you take a look at the entire series and also after 1983 that lighter guys, smaller guys, are at higher risk for death in boxing than heavier guys. That's something you can obviously see from the statistic. Okay, like it's even more dramatic when you take the shoulder distribution. Look, 22% after 1983, 22% of flyweights who fought after 1983 died. Okay, died in this, or were, let's put it that way, 22% of the people, of the whole amount of people that died after 1983 from boxing were flyweights, okay? And 22% of them were bantamweights as well. Then we have a slight decline for featherweights, a little bit more of a decline for lightweights. For welterweights, it's the same. And then for middleweights, it's also a very significant decrease in the amount of deaths, for just 6%, or for the fact that only 6% of all the deaths that occurred in boxing occurred for middleweight boxers. Okay? And here's now the list for deaths according to country. That's also not so interesting. Also something you can really skip. Here's already what I told you. When you take a look at the complete series, 61% of all the deaths occurred, or pre-terminal events occurred in the ring, and so on and so forth. So you also have here all the tables yourself. You can pause here if you like, and I will scroll down slowly so that you can really take a look at all the data we have here, okay? And finally, I want to come to the discussion. The discussion is also a very interesting thing, because they mentioned, of course, once, which is, I think, here, yes, that they said we need more physicians, more boxing physicians, boxing experts who really know, okay, boxing has this and that effect on the human body, especially the head, and we need more boxers, more physicians who are at ringside and who actually have a say in stopping the fight, because most of the time it's only the judge that can stop the fight. And I think you should give the same right to trainers who maybe have a better clue, or obviously have a better clue on how the human body works. And if they say any sort of unusual behavior from the fighters, they should be allowed to intervene and stop the fight immediately, without having to speak with the judge. Or even a better way, in my opinion, bring real physicians to boxing and make them referees, so that they are really in the ring with the persons and they see exactly what's going on, how the fighters are responding, and that they can then act appropriately. Oh my god. And they also say that everybody who was knocked out or TKO'd should undergo neuroimaging and requisite a hospital evaluation to really make sure, okay, everything's fine, you've been knocked out or stopped, but everything's okay. Your central nervous system is okay and you have no brain injury. I think that's also very important. That should also be something that should be made a must in boxing for all those boxers who get knocked out or stopped. Yeah, that's also something. And that's basically what we can say about the study. So the study gives us a lot of information, and people were always asking themselves, why do people in lower weight divisions have a higher risk for death? Because it doesn't really make sense if you first think about it, okay? If you first think about it, you might think like, okay, they punch less hard, so obviously way less harder than heavyweights, and they are matched with an even opponent, so to speak. Okay? I mean, at least in terms of weight. So that body weight doesn't really play a role anymore in the smaller divisions. And what we could see here, and I'm an amateur boxer too, I love this sport so much, okay? And what we really could see here is this, that the sport is not really made for people who cannot make 160. If you cannot make middleweight, you should really pick up another combat sport. That's my take on the whole study. And the reason being is, you need to have a certain frame to be able to take the punches. And it seems like smaller guys cannot cope with the punching power in boxing. Even if they are matched with people who have the same body weight as they have, okay? Even then, you have to be at least able to make 160 and a fast, endurance, strong 160, so not just a 160 where you are almost dying simply by walking around. No, you have to be 160 at 160 fight weight, but you obviously need to be a little bit heavier when you are not in your training camp and you are off season. So your walking around weight should be at least 10 kg, so at least, let's say 25, yeah, I think it's 25 pounds heavier than what you actually weigh when you are in the ring, okay? And I mean, I'm a natural middle to super middleweight. I'm in between 72 or 75 kg, which is 160, 168. I could fight in both divisions. And I would still feel strong. Right now, I'm not really in shape because I'm focusing on powerlifting. I want to get my max power up, and then I'll go back to boxing and shred the excess weight off, so to speak. Okay, the excess weight I have. And I want to tell you something. Not everybody's made for every sport. Like, imagine you want to play basketball and you are only 5'4". Like, how do you want to play basketball with all those giants if you're only 5'4"? And I'm saying 5'4" because that's my height. I'm 165 centimeters tall or short, however you want to put it, but I have a different frame, guys. Most people who have my height would fight, well, I would say at featherweight. Some also in the flyweight division or in the bantamweight division. Most people, or some people, would dare to move up to lightweight, and some maybe even up to welterweight, but I'm fighting at middleweight. I'm a middleweight. I'm a natural middleweight because my walking around weight is way above 160. So I have to make weight, but it's also not that hard for me that I have to starve myself or basically kill myself in the gym, and that there's nothing left from me, or nothing left of me come fight night or come fight day in amateur boxing. So that's one thing. And because I have much larger neck muscles, and I have an overall wider frame, I'm capable of taking punches. And the first time I realized this was when I was not even training boxing. When I was 18, now I'm 32. When I was 18, I was bodybuilding in a gym, and I already weighed then about 80 kg. 80 kg are 176 pounds, yeah, and a few ounces. So that was my weight back then, and I was bodybuilding, and I was doing butterflies on the butterfly machine. So I was doing chest flies on the butterfly machine, okay? And there was this prick, this giant and prick, who said, okay, get off the machine, I want to train on it. And I told him, well, the machine is there for everybody, so we always have to wait until everybody is finished with their set at least, and then you can move in between and do your thing. And we change, we both use it, we both use the machine, but we we do it after one another, of course, so that we do not have to wait so long and that we don't get cold and everything. So I really made him a very obvious and logical offer, because I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you are short or tall, young or old. Everybody has to follow the same rules. And I knew this guy, and this guy was 6'6", or is still 6'6", and his weight at the time was 264 pounds. Okay, remember, I'm 176 and he's 264 pounds. So 40 kg between us. He's taller and way heavier. And he was also 7 years older than me. So he was a man at the time. I was still in my late teens. I was at the brink of becoming a man, but I still wasn't. I still had no self-esteem. I was physically not as strong as I am right now, which is also something I want to mention out, because we saw that it's the young guys who die. And that's the reason why, because the young guys are still not fully developed men. So as a man, from a personal experience, I can tell you, I'm way stronger in everything right now at 30 than I was at 20. And you always have to keep in mind that this is such a dangerous sport. And that's why, when it happens to the young guys. Okay? But nevertheless, let me tell you what this asshole did. He couldn't accept my offer because he was a taller and heavier guy, right? So he's right. Whatever he says, he's right, because he's stronger than me. So he punched me bare knuckle with a straight right hand, directly on my jaw. And he knocked me down. But I got up after 3 seconds. And I told him, what the fuck is wrong with you? Because before that, we never had an issue together. And he punched me again with a straight right. And I went down again. And I went up again after 3 seconds. So what does this show me then in this situation? It showed me that I have a good chin. And it shows me that I have a good neck. Because, guys, this can be deadly. If somebody is 40 kilos heavier than you, and you're not a natural heavyweight, and he punches you bare fists, with his bare fist, that can mean that you die on the spot. So it showed me that I have the frame for boxing, but not everybody has it. And to end this video, right? To end this video, I want to show you a small clip of a guy who's definitely not able to take a punch. And the guy is named Johnny Owen. And unfortunately, he was a bantamweight fighter, and unfortunately, this was his last fight. Okay? So let's see what happens. It's just the highlights. So right now you see him trying to jab the other guy. So the white guy is Owen. He tries to jab him, tries to get inside. He got clipped with a right hook, and now with another one, and he went down for the first time. And you can already see by this man's face that he's gassed and that he's done. So normally everybody should have taken him out at this point, but the referee didn't. And when you take a look at his frame, that's not a boxer's frame. That's a frame of a child, right? And I don't want to discredit the man because he lost his life that night. Okay, so we have to pay him respect for his fighting spirits and his heart. But that's not the frame you can have in a boxing match. Remember, boxers are the hardest punchers in the world. Right? So let's see what happens, okay? So he gave him another chance, although this guy was finished. And the black guy saw, okay, I can definitely always catch him with the right hook. And he did it here again. You saw that his knees buckled, he went down, and his neck snapped back. And that was basically it. So that were his last seconds before he died. And that's the tragic. So that's why I say boxing should be forbidden under 160 pounds. And we have the medical study that hints to that. Okay? That tells us, well, that's how it is. And to give you a conclusion, what they say at the very end is Where is it? I see. Okay. This trend means the trend of people dying in the lower divisions more than in the heavier divisions is likely explained by an increased ability to resist punch forces by the heavier boxers who have more developed neck musculature. Okay? So what I say is what they are saying too. And that's why I think we really have to think about not banning the sport as a total, because I love it. It's my favorite sport. I love it, well, basically to death, right? But we shouldn't really allow smaller men to do this type of combat sport. They can do other combat sports, but not boxing. Please, not boxing, because the risk is simply too high, and it's not worth it, because people do not pay you that much if you are a smaller guy. People are not so interested in seeing you fight if you are a smaller guy. It's only hardcore boxing fans like us who really give everybody the same shot and who really look each and every fight of interesting opponents, of interesting matchups. But the casual boxing fan does not want to see flyweights. The casual boxing fan wants to see heavyweights. That's what it is. And why risk your life for nothing more than a small paycheck and basically no fame, right? So we always have to keep everything in mind when we talk about such devastating things, but I think it's very interesting. And there was nobody on YouTube who really showed us any statistics, any medical science, any medical studies on this, and that's why I did it this time for you. I hope my accent, my German accent, wasn't too much for you, but if you made it to the end of the video, you obviously are fine with everything, okay? So, yeah, that's about it, guys. For my boxers, my amateurs, my pros, my boxing fans all around the world, and see you the next time.